to the Right Now Show. I'm Judy Saxon.
And I'm Charlie Redner. This is the show where we put the emphasis on writers, writing, and the arts. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Charlie. And I understand you have met our guest, Jamie Ford, at a previous occasion.
I did. I was down in Tucson. I was attending a fundraiser, but will you believe it, for the purpose? It was to keep Hispanic literature alive in the school systems in Arizona. And Luis Alberto Urrea, my friend, introduced me to Jamie. He was at that same fundraiser, and he said, keep your eye on this guy. He's going to be something.
Was he ever right? Let me tell you about Jamie just a little bit. His first novel, Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 130 weeks. It has sold over 2 million copies. Welcome, Jamie. Wow, what a pleasure.
Hi, Jamie. I wanted to know what you did on week 131. Did you look at the hemlock bottle, or did you start typing faster?
That was a weird experience. I remember the first time when I made the New York Times bestseller list for the first time. I was on tour. My wife and I were in Milwaukee, and we were probably like 10 days into a tour, and we went to our hotel, and we just conked out, took a nap, turned our phones off, and then when we turned them on, I had like 17 messages, and it was from my editor and publisher and all these people. And then as it progressed over about 2.5 years, you just took it for granted. You're like, okay, okay, it's Christmas, and okay, it's summertime. Yeah, but eventually, it goes down the list, and as a reader, I would read more books, and I see the books coming up, and it's time for someone else to have a turn on the merry-go-round.
Did it ever bother you or worry you that perhaps you hit the grand slam home run with the first book, that you could, because I have a friend, Michael Blake, who died about 5 years ago. Michael wrote Dances with Wolves, and guess what? Grand slam and then some. And what did he do after that, and how did he feel about it?
Yeah, I really did. It put a ton of pressure on the second book. Mm-hmm. And then even with the third book, I wasn't sure what to do with myself for a little bit. And it took me a while to realize that, it's a zeitgeist moment, and you can't manufacture that. It's really out of your hands. The only things you can control are your relationship to the work, and then your relationship to readers. But you can't control the relationship from the work to the readers. And once I realized that, I just let it all go, and then I can just do my own work. And if something, magnificent happens, it happens. But if it doesn't, it's not because it's a bad book or something like that. I know lots of wonderful books that are out of print, sadly. There's just too many good books out there.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about your youth. Your father was Chinese. Your mother was, I think, did I read you say Betty Crocker White?
Yeah, I call her Betty Crocker White. My mom was actually, she was born and raised in the Ozarks in Arkansas, in northwestern Arkansas, in a little town of Marshall, Arkansas, which I think now has about 700 people. So yeah, it was, and my mom's ancestor was Constance Hopkins, I think, who was on the Mayflower. So my mom's family came from that direction, and my dad's family came from this direction, and they sort of met in the middle.
And you were the only...
No, you're right.
Oh, right. Oh, I was going to say, and you were the only Chinese youngster in grade school. And which, well, first, I think we better just touch on what the book's about, because we're going to talk more about it later, but I know we're going to keep alluding to it. So your first novel, the one that we just talked about, The Hotel, just tell us, for those that haven't read it.
Sure. This book right here.
Oh, and here's a book right here.
Oh, wait a minute. I got my copy right here.
Oh, wonderful read. Wonderful. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so go ahead.
With Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet, I really, there's my dog Lucy wandering.
We like action on camera. That makes it great. It's better than talking heads.
Yeah. My wife is a professor, and she's downstairs on another call. So I think our dog is just feeling really neglected right now. I had really, I hadn't written anything with Asian American characters because I didn't see a lot of that on the shelves. There was Amy Tan and Lisa C. and a few other people. And I really stayed away from it because I didn't think anyone would publish that. And then when my father passed away, who was Chinese and spoke Cantonese fluently, then I felt disconnected from that side of my family. And I just wrote this book really for myself. I wrote the kind of book that I would want to read, and I poured a lot of emotion into it. And I didn't know if anyone would really read it. And then it got translated into a ton of languages, and it became the #1 book in Norway for like 4 months. And there's not a lot of Chinese people in Norway. And so evidently something in there was universal, whether that's the love story or the father and son story or just history that people like to learn about.
Right.
I wanted to know more about the 10-year-old Jamie, because he writes a lot. I mean, I see him in all your books. I've read all 3 of them, or at least most of the 3rd book. And, you know, you think like, and I feel like I am that 10-year-old as I read those words. And I wanted to know, what was the real experience like? Even what were you reading at 10? Can you recall?
I was an overly sensitive kid. I was really shy. My parents sent me to poetry camp.
Oh my God, that was, how did you?
That sums up my weird childhood. And you know, being a kid that cries at sad movies and sad books, it's not the best character trait to have in high school. But as a writer, it became my superpower, just being able to be very empathetic. As a kid, I guess my first 3 books, they all have a very young, precocious character.
Right.
And about the same age. And I really wanted to write the 3. And then the book I'm working on now has, you know, characters of all kinds of different ages and is set all over the world, not just Seattle. But as a kid, I had an interesting upbringing because my dad ran a restaurant, and I had that, like, if you go to a mom and pop Chinese restaurant, sometimes you'll see like the kids that work there or running around. That was kind of my childhood. But at the time I was living in Ashland, Oregon, which is a theater town, until I was 12 or through the 5th grade. And it was it was an artsy place. And so many people that we knew worked in theater or worked in the arts. And so me wanting to be a writer was not it wasn't out of the norm.
Did you ever hear the Bell Union restaurant there in Ashland?
Boy, I haven't.
It was owned by a friend of mine and my first employer, Bob Edelman. He wrote a book and they made a movie and a whole line, but he left Malibu and went to go hide out in Ashland, I guess. I can see people hiding there. It's a funky place. There was a commune just up the road when I lived there. So some of my earliest childhood memories are watching naked people jumping off a bridge into a river. It was the Applegate River. It was a very like bohemian hippie childhood, not for me per se, but that I was sort of witnessing. Right.
Well, tell us that I've heard you, I've watched a number of your interviews. Jamie at 15, that played a role in your life.
Yeah, it was a great show in the 70s called James at 15. And it was about this young, precocious kid. My given name is James, so I was kind of interested. And it was set in Oregon, where I was living at the time. And it was this great, honest look at being a teenager. It was written by a novelist named Dan Wakefield, who they had brought him in. In the 70s, there was this movement with the major networks to bring in novelists to try to create dramas. And so they brought him in, and I thought he created a great show. It was very poignant. It dealt with very mature subjects for teenagers, and it didn't last very long. It lasted 2 years and was knocked off the air. It starred Lance Kerwin, who was a young actor who went on to do a couple different things. Then he left Hollywood, and I heard he had moved to Kauai, and I was on Kauai teaching at a writing conference there, and I tracked him down because he was like my hero as a kid, and he's selling timeshare condos, and I found him at one of the hotels, and I just told him that I loved his work, and it was really important to me as a kid, and he really appreciated it.
Well, I know there was an after-school special. I think that was Jamie at 15, where they didn't have a happy ending, as I recall,
Yeah.
and that made an impression on you, I think, in how you felt about having happy endings.
It really did. The show, I guess it was the made-for-TV movie that became the series. But at the end, he's pining away for this girl. He finally gets the girl in this very innocent 70s kind of way, and then it ends with her packing up and moving to Boston, and he's left behind, and he's just watching her and her family drive off into the sunset, and the show just ended like that, and I was just crushed.
That's horrible.
I moved to tears. I cried, and it was really the first time I had seen a drama with really adult circumstances. Before that, it was the Nutty Professor and the computer that wore tennis shoes, and everything came from Disney in my fourth grade imagination. Also, when we lived in Ashland, we only had one channel. It was in this valley, and we had the rabbit ears with tinfoil.
Oh, yeah.
We could still only pick up one channel, and cable hadn't reached us yet. And so I just watched whatever was on, and James at 15 was this show, and it really imprinted on me.
Grabbed you, yeah. Did you did Jamie Ford have a 12-year-old crush on a little blonde with little bangs and things?
I did. I didn't have a crush on a girl. I had a crush on a set of twins.
Oh.
And their names were Heather and Holly Farrow. And
you remember that even now?
Totally.
These are amazing love stories.
Yeah. And we had this thing every month. We had a school skating party, and we all went. And then it was fun, but we all we stressed about the final song of the evening, because it was a couple skate, and you would ask something, and you would hold hands. And so the entire evening, I'm keeping my eye on Heather and Holly. I'm going to ask them. And then when the DJ queued up this song, and they dimmed the lights, I couldn't find.
Good Night, Sweetheart, probably.
I couldn't find them, and my best friend Sean was out there skating with both of them.
Oh, no!
And
go ahead.
No, before my last book came out, I was asked to write a guest essay about love stories, and I recounted that incident, and it got published, and the twins read it.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Did they have a crush on you, perhaps? Because
it was so funny. I was walking through the Denver airport, and my phone lit up with a Facebook group message from two people that I hadn't heard from since I was maybe 13, and they were just tickled. They loved it. And they thought, like, one of them, Holly lives in Baltimore, Heather lives in Oregon, and I was in Montana, but we just decided if we're ever in the same town, we're going to go skating, just to cross that off.
I have to send you a poem. I wrote a poem called Love at 13, and it's about falling madly in love at a skating rink with a little girl, and it's just, it's still one of the great, Judy and I were talking last night on the phone, it's still one of my greatest loves ever, and it was never, realized, but wow, it was strong.
Yeah. There was something very innocent about it that's very, I think that coming of age moment, I think, is really interesting and worth writing about.
And when you write about it, it's amazing. You realize it's not going to, you have all these scenes, even the one in your other book, obviously, that takes place in the house of ill repute. It's still G-rated. Everything you write is G-rated, even though they're climbing in bed together and they're young and they're just, going through all the trials and tribulations they go through.
And with Hotel, and I don't want to give the story away, but you had such suspense. You thought, I hope this is going to be a happy ending. I hope this is going to be. So yeah, it was great.
The red wagon scene is so dramatic in Hotel. I really was. Oh my gosh, that poor kid is really going to get killed here.
They do tours now in Seattle, bitter and sweet tours that are put on by the Wing Luke Museum. and they take people up that hill, and it's a very steep hill. And when they see it, suddenly they understand. I mean, it is just like a
How
drop.
traumatic.
Yeah, it's like a little slice of San Francisco.
Great scene. Great.
That's worse. That's better than the car chase scenes in all those other movies. Let me tell you, I really loved it. I really enjoyed that scene because I had an experience with the Red Wagon. There's so much of your experiences in your books I'm relating to because it actually happened to me.
So then I read that you wrote poetry in late grade school and high school, and I got a kick out of your Facebook. You describe, one of the things you describe, you're a failed poet. So, but it had a place in your life, and I don't think you're a failed poet.
I do write poetry once in a while, but I never share it with anybody. The last time I had anything published was like in high school, in the high school magazine. But there's a book coming out in September called Alone Together. And it's all of these authors and essayists and poets. And we were all asked to write something dealing with the stay at home and COVID and how we've been cut off from the world. And all the money goes to, from the sales, go to independent bookstores.
Oh, good.
And
wonderful.
In it is one of my poems, which it'll be the first poem I've ever professionally published. Yeah, and I'm in there with, like, the other poets are like Nikki Giovanni, who's just very famous, and I'm just swimming in their wake. I'm just honored to be in there.
I run a poetry club here. I'll have to invite you to it. We're going to do a Zoom for the very first time at the end of the month. So
I love it.
Yeah, and we miss each other. I mean, the camaraderie of our little public, our little group of poets is great.
When I meet with book clubs a lot, I recommend that once a year they choose a book of poetry or a graphic novel. And often book clubs, you have maybe winter months where you have more time to read, and in the summer you're busy doing things outside. And so I tend to recommend, pick a book of poetry that you can read in an afternoon or an evening, just to supplement your, the material that you're reading in your book club.
Billy Collins, we interviewed Billy Collins, and I published a literary anthology, and he does a daily show now, Monday through Friday, and he's hilarious. I just love just watching him because he doesn't even know that he's funny, but he is hilarious.
Wow, I didn't know he had a show. That's great.
Yeah, you just go to Facebook and type Billy Collins in, and you'll catch him. And he's just, I just adore the guy.
Well, now talk a little bit about your career as an art director. You were an art major in college, art design, and then you went into advertising, and you were an art director.
Yeah, I worked in that. I wanted to do something in the arts. My dad wanted me to be a fine artist, and my mom wanted me to be a writer.
Oh.
And which was really unique to have both parents like pushing you into arts.
Yes.
Which I was there anyway. But went to art school, more of a commercial arts school. I worked for a couple different ad agencies. And what would happen is when you work in advertising, you're kind of selling your creative soul by the hour, to your clients. And the work's useful and purposeful and interesting. But over time, I got a little, I was a little, I guess, there was a time where there were certain career marks I wanted to hit, and then I achieved them. And then I was living vicariously through the people I hired and watching them spread their wings. And then after that, I sort of fell upwards into management, and I was doing less creative things and spending more time in just in meetings.
Meetings, yeah.
And it when that would happen, I began writing fiction just so I had a creative sandbox different than my day job. And I enjoyed it so much, I just started dreaming of one day I could live in the sandbox. And now I do.
Did you start writing hotel while you were working in an agency business?
I did. I was still a creative director and a partner in a firm. And what happened was in my early 30s, like in my 20s, I tried writing, and I didn't have anything to write about. I think to be a writer, you have to have your heart broken a few times, and I just hadn't accumulated enough scar tissue, for lack of a better term, experience. But once I got into my 30s, I started to spend like a week of my vacation time every year going to a writing conference and having my work critiqued and trying to learn and really, in those environments, you get the tough love criticism you need to get better. And the one good thing about coming from the agency side is, as a creative in the agency world, I got work rejected every day. So getting a rejection letter for a story was just like, okay, I'll work on another one. So that really worked for me. That it kind of developed a thick skin.
Yeah, every writer, and I guess maybe not the art directors, but every copy chief and creative head was writing a book, somewhere after work, or maybe during work. Say that again.
They all are. I know so many that like Hillary Jordan, who wrote Mudbound. She was in advertising creative. Right. Kathy Heppenstall. I think she still freelances for Wieden and Kennedy, but she's probably published 5 novels. There's a bunch of us that go over the wall in the middle of the night and never go back.
Never came back. Yeah.
Well, that was a big step, though, going from your job, I would think, to leaving the job and just starting to be a writer on your own, freelance.
It was odd. We're all fairly insecure, but I had some positive input. So I went to the Squaw Valley Writers Conference in 2006, and I workshopped a story there. And the editor that I met with, he said, this is of the crop of stories assigned to him, it was the best one. And that this is what he said. And this is a quote. He said, "If I were you, I would quit my job immediately and write this novel." And I said, "Have another glass of wine, dude." 'Cause I'm not doing my job. But I did go, I went home and I unplugged my TV and I wrote more. And then probably 3 months later, I had a first draft. But just having that kind of feedback on a professional level was really, it was fuel for me. And then when I had planned to leave the firm and just freelance for 3 years and then get rejected and then go back to work. But I queried a bunch of agents, and I had like 5 offers from agents in about 10 days. And then that was like a sign that something good was happening. And
can I tell you something, Jamie?
Sure.
You probably know this. Your query letter is held up as one of the finest query letters ever written by Query Tracker. And I just want to read the first 3 sentences so you'll know what I'm talking about. "I must admit, I hate Asian stereotypes. You know the one, good at math, hardworking, we all look alike. Come to think of it, that last one might hold water." But even though your agent had picked that up, there were other agents who just threw it in the trash can. So it appealed to her. But I also heard you say that some of your readers want to know how to get an agent. And I said to myself, well, we won't cut to the chase here. We'll just ask Jamie for her personal private cell phone while we're on the air.
Right. My agent's name is Kristen Nelson, and you should all call her right now.
Oh boy.
It's interesting because you can be a great novelist or nonfiction writer and not know how to write a query letter. And you can also be someone like myself who came from an advertising marketing background and write a great query letter and have a terrible book. And
but you don't want to do the marketing side, do you? I mean, really? I mean, I know you're doing this interview. God bless you for being a friend and agreeing to it, but I don't want to do it. I mean, I don't want to do marketing for anybody anymore.
Yeah, it's like being a chef and having someone else cook for you. It's such a delight. And so to have someone else design the cover and someone else handle the marketing, It's wonderful.
Yep.
Oh,
We wanted to ask you initially, then after you send your book in the first time and you have these acquisition editors at the publishing company, are they putting demands on you to make changes? Are they minor? Did they want rewrites? What did they do? And including your agent. I had a friend who had an agent who asked him to do 3 rewrites before he'd present it to some publishers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like my friend Hillary, who I mentioned earlier, she relies more on her agent than her editor for that first draft. And I'm the opposite. I really, once I had, Hotel did very well. And my agent basically said, you now have an editor. I'm happy to step in and help, but I'm going to let you have that relationship with your editor. And I'm here for the business side of things. And that's worked out really well for us. But at the publishing house, with my first 2 books, I'm kind of a minimalist. So that first draft, it's odd. When I go through the edit process, my book gets bigger. And so I might cut 2,000 words, but then my editor will want to know more backstory or a little bit more about this character. And so the manuscript might grow by another 5,000 words. And so my editing process is probably contrary to most people. And so in that, it hasn't been too bad. I haven't had to just, to tear apart my book and start in, knock on wood, because I have a new editor now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think so. I wanted to ask you personally edit. Do you go chapter at a time and go back over it, or day before? How do you work?
With my first books, I edit as I go. And so I will write in the morning, and then maybe from 3 o'clock on, I'll edit. And I'll edit a little bit the next morning and write again. And so when I'm done with that first draft, it's pretty tight. With the book I'm working on now, it has so many different points of view and interwoven storylines that I tried, but I couldn't quite do it. I wrote about 150 pages, and then I had everything from that point on had to be really rough, just so I could make sure the stories mesh. And then I'm going back now and then basically rewriting everything and making it in its final form.
Okay.
So it's kind of whatever the work requires. Sometimes it's a different approach.
with Hotel, it had wonderful twists and turns. And did they just come to you as you were writing, or did you know some of them ahead?
Yeah, both really. I always know my ending, and so I spend a lot of time figuring out the ending, and that becomes my compass north, and I'm going in that direction.
Right.
But I don't plot out too much because I like there to still be a discovery opportunity along the way. And so there were lots of times where I'd write something and suddenly be like, oh, I know what I can do with this. And other times I would have a great idea and I'm like, okay, I'll look at it in the morning, and if it still holds up, then I'll go with it. And other times I'll wake up in the morning and be like, nah, that's not it.
So your characters take you on a ride sometimes?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yeah. And I have to be really careful to make sure I'm not channeling my own emotion of the day, because otherwise it would be, a roller coaster.
Right.
The characters would be very inconsistent. So the character has to be true to the essence of the character that I want them to the rules I want them to behave under. But there's always room for surprise. And I always feel like, sometimes I do writing workshops in high schools, and the kids will throw out ideas. We'll have like a story, and then kids will throw out possibilities. And every time I just keep going until one kid throws out an idea that is so interesting or funny or dark or whatever that the whole class goes, ooh. And then I freeze the class. And I'm like, do you see what happened? That was an uncontrolled emotional reaction. Wow. You didn't plan to react to it. You just did. And that's a good sign that that's an idea worth exploring. And so I do the same thing when I'm writing. I write, and then suddenly like, oh, wow. And then I'm like, I try to remember that moment And then what about that moment elicited that response? And then I focus in on that and I write that.
And as a reader, I reacted to that with the twists and turns. They were perfect. Wow, didn't see that coming.
Did you cry, Judy, in Hotel? I found two spots where, I mean, that kiss scene at the fence. If you don't cry there, I don't think you're alive.
Oh, yes, yes. And well, here again, I don't want to give away the plot, but it could just be with me a couple of times, it was just one sentence that he said. It just, the tears came. I mean, what a gift, Jamie, to be able to do that.
I had a tough time reading Love and Other Consolation Prizes because I kept reading it. And as I was reading it, I had to stop and write down these phrases. I just loved the way you put words together. I really did. It took me a long time to get through the book because I'm just copying these things down. I have pages and pages of just your phrases, Jamie. You are just incredible.
I do that with Pat Conroy's books. Because when I grow up, I want to be Pat Conroy. Like that's Pat was my idol. And I was listening to one of his audiobooks and I had to just stop and make a note. And then, so I will go back and re-examine those to try to figure out what he's doing.
Yeah.
He was one of the, I mean, I got to spend a little bit of time with Pat in the years before he passed. And just what a great man, what a great writer, wonderful human being. And what a loss when he passed away.
Yeah.
You said an interesting thing about you feel that many writers write what they lament.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never heard that before. And when you think about it, I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps not nonfiction, maybe not science fiction or murder mysteries, but I think literary fiction.
Yeah.
I see the author a lot in the books. I can find them. If I know them especially, then I'm like, okay, I totally see you on the page. The reader may not see it. But I haven't lived in Seattle for decades, even though before COVID I was there 8 or 9 times a year. But I miss Seattle, and I don't miss the Seattle that exists now. I miss the Seattle that I grew up in. And there's a song lyric by he's a great songwriter named Jason Isbell, and he had a lyric that was that Daddy said the river will always take you home, but the river can't take you back in time, and Daddy's dead and gone. And that's kind of the spirit I try to write from. And I do write about older Seattle because I miss it. And I found it very interesting when I read Ivan Doig's books, because he was from Montana, where I'm currently living. And he's been he was in Seattle for decades. He was in Seattle writing about Montana, and I'm in Montana writing about Seattle.
Yeah. And
when we finally met and shook hands, I just pictured a Freaky Friday moment. We're going to jump into each other's heads. But that really confirmed for me that certain writers, they long for something, and they will that'll manifest on the page.
Yeah. Yes. And then I in one of the interviews, you were asked about what writing had taught you, and you mentioned the word resilience. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, writing's hard. I mean, it's hard in every dimension. Like the actual writing, just because, I mean, at least for me anyway, the books don't get easier. It's like, I describe it like climbing Mount Everest. The next time you climb it, the mountain isn't any shorter, but you have the confidence of knowing you've done it once, but it's just as strenuous, it's just as risky, just as much heartache. And that can be really hard, because there was a time where I thought, okay, I've written a book, I'm a best-selling author, I got this. And then
That's right. This is gonna be easy from here on in.
I try to write the next book. I'm like, oh, this is not easy. And then you get, you have to find your place and where you can emotionally exist as a writer, because the work goes out there and some people love it and some people hate it. You get good reviews, you get bad reviews, and it can be, I mean, those can really derail a lot of people. A lot of I've seen authors go down the rabbit hole and go onto Amazon, and they're arguing with people that give them bad reviews. And I mean, you can just go down some bad roads. And so really, I think it was Harlan Ellison who said, the trick isn't becoming a writer, the trick is staying a writer.
Oh,
And there's truth to that.
A lot. Yes, there is.
hey.
There's some very successful authors like Catherine Stockett, who wrote The Help.
Oh, yes.
I've heard that she will never write another book.
Really?
I didn't hear that from her. I heard that from people that know her, and that just that process, that level of success, what it did to her personal life. There were lawsuits involved. That it can really, it can really, it can be a wonderful thing, and it can also be a curse too.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's an author, and I won't say who it is, but very popular best-selling author who had a smashing book, and then the follow-up they paid tons of money for, and then it just bombed. But that person kind of got on their feet again. And then when another author friend I know had this smash best-selling book, she actually went to this author's house and just knocked on his door and said, I'm just going to take you for a walk. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen and what to look out for, and you'll get through it. And so there are some, when I heard that, I thought, man, I need that person to knock on my door.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of one-hit wonders in the world, in music and everywhere. And, Bob Edelman's book was, and he called it the Grand Slam. First is the hardcover, then the soft cover, then the movie, and then the soft cover with, the star on the cover. And that's, William Holden in his case, in Dances with Wolves, it's Kevin Costner. So that's the Grand Slam of it also. You've got...
It really is.
The ball is in the air for you, but God bless, you're doing wonderful.
Yeah, and you can really get caught up in the other things, the film options and the ancillary things, everything that's not writing. And it's one of those things. Careful what you wish for, because when you get it, it may not be what you thought it was going to be.
Well, you could say that now Hotel, they're making a movie of that and a Broadway musical. I read.
Yeah.
Because the jazz is in there, they want to put all that music into action there.
Yeah, in both of them. The movie, unfortunately, COVID did a number on both of those productions, and so where we left the movie. We had done some very high-level fundraisers in Hollywood. These gatherings where people, very powerful and or wealthy people were invited to a special party to involve them in the possibility of making this film with the producers and George Takei, who's a producer. And the screenwriter was working on the script, and then COVID hit, and I learned a new term, a new bit of Latin called force majeure, which is in every Hollywood contract that says if there's some act of God, then everything can be extended and put on hold. And so that production's been put into force majeure, and we'll pick back up whenever it possibly can. The Broadway musical is another animal entirely. The producers based in New York, one's from Seattle, but they both live in New York. They wrote all the music. They brought in Broadway talent and did several performative. They call them readings, but they're singing all the songs. They can't call them an actual preview, because everyone is union talent and they have to pay them differently. So they call it a reading, even though they're singing.
Right.
And they raised a bunch of money, and it was in a production cycle. And again, it just got put on the shelf and I feel bad because these are all professional actors, stage actors who their careers have been frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be just so hard.
Oh yeah. One good thing might be coming out of you're working on this people with the screenplay is that when you're writing your novels now, are you using perhaps something like Final Draft where you can actually put scenes in and then print out 3x5 cards and pin them to a board like I do?
The producers of the film were kind enough to let me write the first draft.
Oh,
and
really?
I wrote it in Final Draft, and it was terrible. It was awful. And I quickly learned that a really good screenwriter is a completely different animal than a novel.
Absolutely is.
But I do use Final Draft. Occasionally I'll get asked to submit like a graphic novel script or something like that. And I use Final Draft for that because it has just the way it's structured, it works out.
Absolutely. It's wonderful for that. And as I said, you take the scenes, you can just print the scenes out and pin them to a board, move them around. Yep. And there you go. Yeah.
And it's so intuitive. It's a great program.
Yeah, but it is hard to convert your own book. Do you know, starting with just the first step, what to leave in and what to take out? I mean, that alone is a very hard.
Yeah, the screenwriter that they've signed for Hotel, I mean, in my first meeting with her, I mean, she described a way to introduce the characters of Henry and Keiko and Mrs. Beatty on screen in a way that was so clear and simple and different from the book, and yet added something really powerful to the book. I was so impressed. She was
good. Wow. Do you have a routine, Jamie, of writing when you're home?
Yeah, I mean, for my routine, I'm usually up by 6, have a cup of coffee, walk the dog, sit down, check emails, and then I'm writing or attempting to write until the early afternoon, and then I'll tend to edit or do some on the fly research to sort of source out some answers to some questions that come up as I'm writing. That's kind of my routine. It's nice, the COVID stay at home has actually been really good for my productivity, because I used to travel all the time, like every month, every other month.
Yeah. Right.
The first 2 years after Hotel came out, I was on the road 100 nights each year. I never had any idea I would do that much traveling, and I went and did book tours in Italy and
oh my goodness,
Norway, and went to Japan, and I just felt like a book has a shelf life, so I'm just gonna
do it,
lean into it while I can, and it just kept going, and so that really hurt my writing time. So since the shutdown, it's been the most productive I've ever been in years. So I feel bad because it's traumatic for most people, and for me, I write at home anyway, and so it just cut off my travel, leaving me with nothing but time to work.
Yeah.
Wow. There are a lot of writers like Luis Urrea who were afraid of becoming border writers. He said, I don't want to be pigeonholed in becoming a border writer. Do you have any fear that you're becoming the Chinese, Japanese, Asian guy to go to when you want to read about that?
It's not that I'm afraid of it. Sometimes I will see stories that I wish I could write, and I just don't feel I'm the best person to write them. After Hotel came out, it deals with the Japanese internment, and so many people in the Japanese American community had suggested I write about the 442nd, which was the all Japanese battalion during World War II. And I really felt like I'm not qualified for that. And then Daniel James Brown, who wrote Boys in the Boat, is writing that book now. And I'm like, oh man, I should have written that. I could have done that. So those things kind of happen. I'm drawn to certain stories just because of who I am, the family I grew up in. Right. And so exploring family stories that happen to be Asian, it's fun for me. It makes me feel like I understand my grandparents better and my dad and stuff like that. But when it comes to short fiction, I write all over the map. And so, yeah, so people ask me to contribute to different anthologies. So I've written crime noir, I've written middle grade horror, I've written, speculative fiction and steampunk. And I have a bigger box of crayons that I get once in a while. And that makes it feel like I'm not pigeonholed into a certain type of book.
I read that your parents writing your parents' obituaries really was important in your writing career. Kind of started tell us about that.
Yeah, I lost both my parents fairly close together when I was 31, in my early 30s, and before that, I just didn't have a very deep emotional reservoir to draw from. And after that, suddenly there was a vibrancy to my writing that wasn't there before. And that was because of the loss of my parents. And it's tragic because they were never alive to see my success. I'd like to think that they were a part of it anyway, and are aware of it. But it's interesting. I visited a high school once in Seattle, and I give a lot of talks at high schools. And at this high school, I do this at a lot of my talks at high schools in particular. At the end of the talk, I will say, in every gathering of high school students, for every 100 students, there are probably 3 or 4 people who, for whom high school is not an everyday party, that it's a real struggle just to survive and to get through. And I told them, if that's you, I just want you to know that was me, and you'll get through it. And all the things that you think are your weaknesses and flaws will become your superpowers later. And the world is generally made better by late bloomers, I think. And I left the school. The person who was like my faculty escort was escorting me back to my car. And this student comes running out of the school and hugs me. And she's like, I'm that person. And that meant a lot to me. And I think losing my parents was like that. It finally coalesced all of these, fears and insecurities, and made me realize I can use all those things for a good purpose, and I can write about those things from a point of emotional authenticity.
You said that maybe we don't know our parents until after they're gone, and I relate to that very much so. And there were deep, dark secrets in my family that I didn't know about until after they were gone, and they start to come out from aunts and uncles and cousins. And God, they would have been so much better if they'd been brought up to the fore, because there are explanations now for why things the way they were, why the Thanksgiving dinners were always quiet.
Yep, that was my family.
Arguments, whatever.
Yeah, I grew up in a household that I would later look back on it, and it felt like a nuclear bomb had gone off. And I'm just living in the fallout, and I never knew why. And then as an adult, you sort of, these things come to the surface.
Yes, they do. And
again, when I'm in a high school or a college setting, I always tell the kids, I say, go home and interview your parents and interview your grandparents. Ask them about their childhoods, ask them their happiest moment, their saddest moment, their most embarrassing moment, their proudest moment, and just write those things down. And because once they're gone, once that door is closed, it's not going to open again. And that's the real loss.
I wish I had the answers to those questions with my parents. It really is,
So do I. And my grandparents too. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Grandparents too.
What a beautiful message, Jamie, to tell the high school students.
I hope they listen. They're probably not. They're probably just like, on.
No.
Together. This guy's always
There's that speaker that comes in from the outside that really touches your heart and touches your soul, and you remember it.
You
Jamie,
never forget.
they remember it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Your hotel is required reading in thousands of classrooms, I read.
Yeah. I even went to I went to high schools in Norway that were reading it. and I was invited to Switzerland to go to 5 high schools that were reading it there, which is crazy. I never envisioned that I would become homework. It's so, and every fall I get emails and tweets from high school kids and some college kids, asking for, answers to questions and stuff. It's a dubious honor for sure.
Well, tell us about what you're working on now, your latest.
Yeah, I'm at my writing desk, so here it is.
Okay.
New book. I'm so close to being done.
I see different colors there. Does different colors mean different chapters?
Yeah, this one actually, I have 6 different point of view characters, and it's a big Rubik's Cube of a novel. Wow. It's a lot. It's very ambitious for me. 6 different time periods, and they all. Oh my
God! Different.
Oh my!
They all interrelate, and so the new book, I'm calling it my epigenetic love story, and it's about. And there's a lot of scientific breakthroughs showing that trauma is often, it affects the methylation of our DNA. Trauma can affect subsequent generations. Mm-hmm. And so it's about inherited trauma, but it's also some of the good things we inherit from our parents and grandparents.
And it's called Tomorrow, Dorothy, did I read?
Right now it's called Tomorrow, Dorothy. And all my books have a working title, and I suspect it will change. Once the book is done, then I don't name the baby till the baby's delivered. And so that's the working title. It might survive, but I have a new relationship with a new editor. So that's a discussion I think we're going to have at some point.
Do you, I think all of your books are different time zones. The first 2 are a generation apart, and the third one is maybe 8 years or something.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about how that worked. Did you ever read A Long Walk Through Water? It was a New York Times bestseller. It's a dual story, and it's the first time I read something that caught my interest like that. But what you do is amazing because, the pieces all fit together at the end. It's a great puzzle, but you make it work, Amy. You make it work.
This one's complicated.
You asked for it this time, didn't you?
Yeah. And writing it in a way so that it's not work for the reader is really the trick. And so that's, I have to be super careful.
Yeah.
This one, the time periods go from around 1832 to about 2045. So it steps just a few decades into the future. And it's a bunch of different time periods. And we'll see how it goes. My editor right off the bat was like, I think
you're crazy, right?
Yeah, she was like, maybe stick to 4 point of views instead of 6, and so we'll see. I think I've got it working. Even yesterday I was talking to my wife, I'm pretty sure it's working now, and so we'll see.
Wow.
Oh, that's exciting! Wow. Well, do you have any words of wisdom for our community who want to who are watching and want to start that book, or they're struggling with it, or?
Yeah, a lot of things. Right off the bat, I don't have a degree in English or an MFA in creative writing. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. You just have to, just go there. I think the best art is personal. And so a lot of us have very personal stories that we want to tell or fictionalize. And I think everyone should give it a shot. And it's never too late. Norman MacLean wrote A River Runs Through It in his, I think it was 87 when it was published. It was nominated for a Pulitzer. And so it's never too late, and it's also never too early.
Frank McCourt, wasn't he pretty old at the time?
Yeah, I don't think there's
McCourt.
I think the more accumulated life experiences makes you a better writer. And the other thing is allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to have some bad notes. And if every piano player sat down and gave up when they had a bad note, there would be no music. And so you just I fail all the time. I throw out chapters and pages, and that's just part of the process. And if you give yourself permission to fail, then I think you won't be so tight when you're writing. You'll write with more of an open mind. I think that's really useful. And occasionally, a writer told me this early on in my career, and I did it. He said, go to a garage sale, buy 3 of the worst out-of-print books you can find, and force yourself to read them, like as a writer, and then pick them apart. And then when you sit down with your own writing, you will catch yourself when you make those mistakes. And it only cost me about $0.25, and it's really good advice.
Yeah,
and so I tell that to a lot of people because it was very useful. Sometimes if you only read like your favorite writers while you're trying to write, it's kind of like working out and only reading Vogue magazine. You're gonna die a death of comparison, and it's unhelpful. And so I think sometimes you learn more from reading bad stuff than good.
I think another piece of advice that probably writers should get is stop talking about it and do it. So many people want to talk about their writing, right, Judy? Do we know what we're doing?
Oh, yeah, I relate to that. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard work, for sure.
It is hard work. You got to make yourself do it.
Yeah.
Hey, Judy, I think we're going to have to wrap this up. It's been so much fun. I hate to do it, but
thank you so much for having me.
Things to do.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
You have a quote, Judy?
I do. Talking about resilience, this quote is, "A good half of the art of living is resilience," by Alain de Botton.
Okay.
That's true.
Not one of us can rest, be happy, be home, or be at peace with ourselves until we end hatred and division. John Lewis. That's my comment.
Oh, wonderful.
Isn't that beautiful?
I like it.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. You are a total delight. Thank you for taking the time. We're indebted to you.
Thanks to everyone. Be well.
Thank you so much. I'm Judy Saxon, and thanks for watching.
Charlie Redner, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.